Yes, my two most recent books, The Images of Modern America, of Boston Marathon, and Traditions and Lore. The photos were basically from those two. But I'm going to focus on some traditions of the Boston Marathon, some very unique to Boston. As Robert did say, I've run Boston 23 times. I've been covering it for decades, so a lot of insight, behind-the-scenes stories that I like to share. Also with the Boston Marathon, it is interesting that the first ever marathon was the qualifying marathon for the 1896 Modern Olympic Games in Greece. The second marathon was the actual marathon in 1896 Modern Olympic Games. The third marathon ever, first one in this country, was from Stamford, Connecticut to New York. It just one time only in 1896. And then 1897, the Boston Marathon on Patriots Day. It was the fourth one ever. So it's the longest continuously run marathon, which is nice to have in our backyard. So I will pick, I got about a half a dozen long-time traditions that's really unique to the Boston Marathon. And one of the ones that dates back decades is the champion wreath that you see here. This is the laurel version. There's laurel wreaths from laurel bay leaves and an olive branch wreath, which is like a little tighter version of it. You've seen many different versions. For the 1896 Modern Olympic Games in Greece, the first Modern Olympic Games after centuries of not having an Olympics in ancient Greece, they chose these kinds of wreaths, but they kind of gave a branch to the winners, not a wreath yet. But the connection is that the laurel trees and the olive branches were in the city of Altus, where Zeus reportedly lived and was worshipped. So there's a sacredness there. So when they fashioned wreaths, that was the honor from the gods in Greece. And the team from America in the 1896 Modern Olympic Games, most of the team members were from the Boston Athletic Association, the BAA. And they did quite well. They scored very well. Got some first, second places. Did actually very well at the games. And one of the events, as I said, was the marathon. And they loved that idea, so they brought that back home in Boston. And at the time, the BAA was formed in 1877, and they just had what was called the BAA Games, which culminated on a track behind the Boston Public Library. It's no longer there now, the track. So they wanted to, let's end the games with this new event called the marathon. At the time, it was about 24, 25 miles. So it would finish at the track, so then they had to measure what the distance would be, and it became Ashland, Massachusetts at the time. We all know the marathon grew to 26.2 miles. But that connection between the Boston Marathon and Greece started right there. So then later on, what they tried to do is to include another connection with Greece, like I was saying, with this wreath. In 1931, this gentleman here on the right, George Demeter, who's holding a wreath. This is 1946. Stylianos Kyriakidis from Greece won the Boston Marathon in 1946. So George Demeter, who was the first Greek-American state rep in Boston, very prominent man, very proud of his Greek heritage, started around 1931, started getting wreaths from Greece, actually formed in Greece near the tomb of the Athenians from the Battle of Marathon of 490 BC, where the Athenians beat the Persians and basically secured our way of life and democracy. Had the Persians won, it'd be a different world. So these branches, these olive branches here from the olive trees are from the tomb of the Athenians area, still are. So in 1931, George Demeter started bringing wreaths from Greece to Boston. And he presented it to Kyriakidis right here, who crossed the finish line in 1946, as I mentioned. In later years, this is Bill Rogers, who's won Boston 4 times. This is his old wreath. It's brown. It used to be green. From 1975. He's not sure where the other wreaths are. He put it in a shadow box in his store. There's different versions. When it first started in 31, it was from the olive branches. And then mid-'80s or so, they couldn't get them all the time, so they made it the laurel wreaths, but they kept that connection with the wreaths between Greece and Boston. It's now this gold-dipped wreath that you see on TV where the winners get presented with the wreath at the finish line. This is the olive branch wreath. You can see the difference between this one and the earlier ones that were more full, the laurel branches. It's very beautiful gold. It's actually gold dipped, has some weight to it too. It's really nice. For the 2,500th anniversary of that Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, in 2010 was the first year they had the gold dip wreaths in Boston Marathon to honor that anniversary. And the next time they had a gold wreath was the 2014 Boston Marathon, the first anniversary after the bombings, and it's been gold ever since that they have. So when you see the gold dip, you know where it's coming from. These wreaths are made in Greece, like I said, from branches of the trees near the tomb of the Athenians. They're flown from Greece to Boston, and over the years, a real nice ceremony. In the early years, one of the years with Stylianos Kyriakidis, he brought it with him from Greece for George Demeter, had it in the back seat of the taxi cab, and gave it to him when he arrived at the airport. It's changed now. Now it's a much grander ceremony, which is great. They either have it at the Great Hall at the Massachusetts State House, which is this right here, and you can see all the dignitaries. Governor Dukakis is right here. Tom Grilk, BAA CEO, former, and many more people in the podium here. So they have a big presentation at the Great Hall at the Massachusetts State House, or they have it inside the Consul General, the Greek, down the street from the State House, actually. And they present the wreaths that you can see right here on the podium. So it's a real nice exchange between Greece and Boston that they continue decade after decade, that they give from Greece to Boston. The connection has not broken. And the mayor and the governor, as you can see here, this is Mayor Wu here, Governor Healy here presenting the gold wreath at the finish line. They present it there. The earlier days, like with George Demeter, if you see the old black and white pictures, sometimes when the winner would cross the finish line, George Demeter would be running after the winner to put the wreath on. His guy in a nice suit. And it's like, he usually stops. But it was kind of fun seeing him run over there. So when you see this on TV in the presentation, you have a little history of where this is coming from. This great connection between Greece and Boston hasn't wavered since then. So it's an amazing connection that they have. And it's so much more detailed, too. But it's great, like these pictures I was telling you in both of the books that really give detail. Another one of the great traditions of Boston, every marathon has a start and finish line. But over the years, Boston has really paid attention to the start and finish line. In the early days, this is the 1912 Boston Marathon. You can't see a starting line because it's all muddy. This is in Ashland right here. But in later years, you would get this finish line right here is in front of the Prudential Building on Ring Road, which is parallel to Boylston Street. From 1965 to 1985, this is where the finish line was. It wasn't actually on Boylston Street. You'd run on Boylston Street, and then after about a block or two, veer off it and finish right here on Ring Road, which is no longer there. But as you can see, the early lines were just a white line with the word finish. Sometimes it would say marathon, BAA marathon. They didn't put too much effort into it. Most races didn't. This is 1966 right here. That you can see the finish line. In 1981, however, this is the starting line in Hopkinton. Jack LeDuc was asked to make a sign to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Johnny the Elder Kelly running the Boston Marathon. And they put a nice sign up on one of the buildings. But then they also started saying, well, let's, Jack said, let's do something with the starting line. It's just like a line. So this is a picture that he gave me for the book in 1981. This is the first different kind of starting line. It's green and white, BAA, Hopkinton. So it's nice that he has an image of the actual line. For decades, Jack LeDuc would paint these. If you ever see the start lines, it would just grow and with amazing color and amazing detail. For the 100th, this is Jack right here. For the 100th, this is the 100th. It was 100 feet, 100 inches thick from top to bottom. And he really got detailed. Every year would be something different. The first year, the wave starts. In the old days, it'd be like 12 o'clock noon, gun went off, everybody went and run. Then after a while, they changed it to like a few thousand at a time to spread it out, called wave starts. Jack painted waves on the starting line. anniversaries of somebody's win, or Dave McGilvey, the race director, when he ran for his 40th or 50th Boston Marathon in a row, he would paint something like a little medallion on it. So he'd always paint something which is really nice next to it. For the 100th, as you can see him working on this, it grew. For the 106th Boston Marathon, it was 106 inches wide. Then he had to pull it back. He's like, all right, this is getting too much. I'm running out of paint. But for years, you would see the artistry of this. It's unbelievable. This year is 2005. Johnny Kelly died in the fall of 2004. A two-time winner from 1935, 1945. Lived down the Cape. We all knew him. We loved him, Johnny Kelly. So to commemorate that, this is the start line of 2005. And Jack LeDuc put this beautiful illustration of Johnny Kelly and the year and everything. This was the start line in Hopkinton. So you can see the detail that he did. And he wouldn't tell anyone. It'd be a surprise. So when all the runners, because they always wanted to see there, take pictures, you see them all looking down as they're running because they wanted to see what it was. It was hysterical. But he always did a great job. American flags. And it was amazing the detail that Jack would do. And then a few years, he actually did the start line and the finish line. Like at the 100th, he did that. He sort of stopped doing that. Then he retired from doing the starting line. The finish line itself has this great story, too. This is them actually painting the finish line a few days after the Boston Marathon. The finish line now that you see, it's like this latex spread that's over the course, over the finish line itself, on top of this. And after the marathon, they peel that back, throw it away, and do whatever they want with it. And they actually paint the finish line for the rest of the year for tourism. Dave McGilvey always jokes, the race director, because I think we're one of the few, if not the only marathon that paints the finish line after the race. And what they do is on Boylston Street, because I covered this, I did this a story one year, is they block off Boylston Street, probably like a Wednesday or Thursday after the marathon, weather permitting. So it was great when I drove, I could park on Boylston Street. It was great. You can never do that. And they, for a while, it's just all yellow with no detail, which is strange to see. Then they have these huge stencils for the finish, depending on what year it is, what they want to put on, what design. John Hancock, now it's Bank of America, the unicorn, the BAA. So it depends on all the different details. It takes several hours and a couple of different kinds of paint and big machinery to do this. So this is what you see for the rest of the year. And I took this photo from like the 54th floor of the John Hancock to show you that the finish line is so big and detailed. You can see it, I don't know about some space, but pretty close. So it's really interesting the way they have that. And you can see how clear this is. Again, I took this from the 54th floor of the John Hancock. And this is the public library itself, so you can kind of get an idea of where you are on Boylston Street. So it's really nice to have that for Boston. Other places do that too, so which is kind of neat. Another tradition that Boston has, I mean, a lot of marathons do this, is the finisher medals. Now, for decades, since 1897, the winner would get a medal, obviously. This is a display from the BAA, the Gloria Ratty collection. She was the late BAA management that she would organize and get all these artifacts. This is examples of old, like 1897 medal from the winners. They'd have a little diamond, really nice, different examples of medals that the winners would get. Sometimes Clark, I'm not too sure what that one was for, but different examples. The winner would get a nice medal with a diamond in it, or diamond chip, or whatever, over the years. The finisher medals that you see here and here didn't start until 1983, actually, which everyone loves to get. Ashworth Awards out of North Attleboro makes those, and it wasn't until 1983 that they first started doing that, which is interesting. The same company, Ashworth Awards, that do the finisher medals, also does this. This is the course record medal. There's the nice little jewel here, and there's the diamond for the male-female, open male-female wheelchair. So in addition to when they do this every year, is the actual finisher medal. This is the first year, 1983, the 87th anniversary of it. And other marathons started to do medals, and the BA was a little behind the times incorporating that. It was a tough period in the early 80s. They almost lost the marathon. It almost became the property of someone else that the BA would still organize. but went to a court case and it got back to the BAA. So the early mid-'80s was a tough period. The wreaths were continued. They almost kind of forgot about that, but they didn't. They really wanted to keep the wreaths and the start line and finish line. So there were some traditions that even during the tough times, they continued. But for 1983, the BAA, the board decided, when it got brought up, let's have a finisher medal. A lot of other places do that. So the design really hasn't changed to the point of having the logo of the unicorn, which is the Boston Athletic Association logo, and the actual name itself, the colors of the blue and yellow. The design from round, the first years didn't have a ribbon, but it was round. Then they changed different sizes of it. It's changed a little bit. This is Ashworth as they're printing them out, so you can see it's sort of like a horseshoe shape of it, but they still kept the unicorn looking to the left. They've cut out outside this. They try to change it, in interviewing Ashworth, he was telling me that to try to maintain it, the essence of it, but change it a little bit each year, each couple of years, just give it a little different, maybe a color scheme or something. This is a collection that they showed me. You can see how it did start with the round. This is the first year, 1983. So then they would have the horseshoe, where it was filled in with enamel on each side. Then it was hollow on each side, multicolored. So they would have different kind of versions, a little bit more gold colored here. They're all beautiful. They're all very striking the way you see them. The new one with the Bank of America, I think, has more white. There's a little introduction, some white colors on that, but the same kind of horseshoe with a line like that. So the medals are something that, this is, for runners, this is, if you can't get an Olympic medal, which who can, other than the 1% of all the great athletes. The Boston Marathon is one of the greats in the world marathon with the 6 different cities. Boston having to qualify, that's one of the big ones. So I'm glad they still do that. Although they change it, they try to keep it the same essence, which I think is excellent. Another tradition with Boston, this is very unique to Boston, is after the war, the Japanese athletes were very welcome to Boston. This is 1953, Keizo Yamada winning, and Mayor John Hines greeting him. For those of you who run and pick up your bib number at the Expo, the Hines Auditorium is named after this gentleman, John Hines, the mayor. And this is the finish line, like I was telling you before about the finish line. You can see how thin it is. It changed a little different when Jack would do it. This is Exeter Street here. This is Boylston Street cutting across. So the finish line is now down here. This is the Lenox Hotel, just to sort of give you an idea. For a number of years, the finish line was here on Exeter Street. They ran down here, crossed over Boylston, and finished here. So Keizo Yamada, who's a great marathoner, Japanese, he really loved the inclusion of Boston. So the Japanese, the Omi-Ochi 30-kilometer race in Omi, Japan, contacted the BAA in the early 70s, and to sort of thank them, they wanted to create this relationship between the two races. And they did that. 1975 was the first year, so what they still do this, is like an athletic cultural exchange. At the beginning, the top 2 winners of the Boston Marathon were invited to run at the Omi-Ochi 30K, which at the time I think was in March or February, it changed back and forth. And the first 2 in Omi-Ochi was invited to come to the BAA and run the Boston Marathon. And you would have exchanging of gifts, cultural things, hair taken to a clam bake, things like that, museums and everything. But it was a really neat thing, and they had an agreement every 5 years that they would do this. And this is the agreement. Joanne Flaminio, former BAA founder with the Omi mayor, signing the agreement. This is 2015, the last one before the COVID. 2020 race would have been the next one, but it was canceled, like everything else was. So they would have a nice, every 5 years here in Japan, they would have a great presentation with each other. They would have the top athletes from each race here, and you have Gloria Ratty here and Joanne Flaminio. So they would meet each other, try to learn a little Japanese, try to learn English. It was really great. And interviewing athletes from both races for the book, it was interesting to listen to some of these athletes, what stuck out to them, whether it was the food here, or, in the U.S., the cheers of the crowd just going real nuts as they're running by. In Japan, it's a little different. So I remember in Japan, one of the athletes, the American athletes who ran as representative of the Boston Marathon, he said the top finishers go on a podium at the finish line in Japan, and they get a gift from each sponsor. So they're standing there, and if it's like 10 main sponsors, each sponsor comes up, gives them a gift, and they're like, thank you, and they put it aside, and thank you. It's like, they need another luggage to get home with everything they get. So it's a neat cultural exchange that they still do, which is very unique to Boston. I can't think of anything else that is close to that. And one of the great things that Japan does is these really beautiful ceramics of the birds that are real indigenous to Japan and everything. So they're the different gifts back and forth. So it's not just, okay, you two win, you can run, and then that's it. It goes deeper than that, cultural. They stay with families. They've opened it up more now, more recently, that it's just not the first two finishers. They can pick and choose. I think last year or year before, they had some Hopkinton kids who did well in the marathon. They went to Japan to represent it. So they opened it up more to, it doesn't have to be the top two American winners or top two, vice versa, to different countries, which is nice. So they've sort of kept that as a nice connection between the two. Another tradition that Boston started a little bit late is the village. Some races, they don't have villages. Some do, like New York or Staten Island, because the first 2 miles of the race is the bridge. Verrazano now is the bridge, so everyone has to be on one side, Staten Island side of the bridge. I run New York, you get there and you take a nap, you forget what day it is. You're in this area for hours. So there's your village. But for Boston, there's two villages. One is the elite athletes village, and then the athletes village for everybody else. The athletes village for everybody else, this is the one you can see in Hopkinton at the high school and middle school. Basically, it started for the 100th in 1996. Boston averaged under 10,000 runners on average. For 1996, the centennial, the 100th, everyone wanted to do it. So they bumped it up to 38,000, which is a huge jump. So to accommodate the runners, they had to have a village like this, right at the high school, with a huge open field in the back that everyone goes to, similar to what you'll see on TV if you watch it again this year. Prior to this, I mean, there were years you could actually just go up to Hopkinton High School, get your number, the morning of the race, which you can't do now. But it was that low-key, just races were like that. You could do that. But when you have 38,000 runners, you kind of have to put them somewhere. So you have this huge field. And I remember from the 1996, for those of you who were around at that time, it snowed that week, I think a couple of days before that. So this is all covered with snow. So Dave McGilvey, as I said, the race director, had to think very quickly what to do. So to clear off the snow, he also had a couple of Army helicopters hovering about 100 feet above the ground to sort of dry everything. It worked. I always joke with them. I said, I hope you told the neighbors. Because they're loud when they're way up. And he had sawdust and hay and everything. So it did work pretty well. I mean, it was messy, but what could you do? It's New England. But everyone gets here now with the different starts. Because back then, with just a noontime start, everyone, gun went off, everybody went. But now with delayed starts, I think there's 9 starts. It's a little more organized to spread it out. The high school is 7/10 of a mile from the starting line, so it takes a little while to walk up the side street to get into your corral and everything. So it's much more organized. But it started, innocently with, hey, we have to house these people. This is the Fairmont Copley, the host hotel where all the media events are and everything. For the elite athletes, for their village in the late 80s, Fred Tressler and Tim Kilduff created, through Hancock, a great elite athletes village. There's a building behind this, which is no longer there. John Hancock Conference Center was behind this building. And they organized the top 30 or 40 elite athletes for 2 weeks. They would start to come in. It was like a fortress. It was unbelievable. I did a story about this and interviewed me, and I was there. It's like, figure how many floors, 2 or 3 floors of the conference center. They had security to be at the front, and the elite athletes walk in. In the old days, footage you see on TV, the elite athletes being paraded out into, it looks like they're going through a hotel lobby to the bus. That was the John Hancock Conference Center. It was a nice little parade that they were cheered on the morning of the race. They get on the buses, and the buses take them to Hopkinton, the elite athletes only. Again, behind the Fairmont Copley here. And it was great. If they had to go to a sponsorship event, a press conference, they wanted to go shopping, to and from the airport, everything was so meticulously organized. You could tell they called this the boiler room. It's like, it looks messy, but everything went through here. It was unbelievable. Nothing was left for chance to pick up anyone at the airport. If somebody missed something, if a coach is coming later, if someone is diabetic and they need medications, whatever the person needed from a different country, whatever food they would need, they had a dining area in there. The Elite Athletes Village really catered. And not every marathon does this. I was talking to a lot of the elite athletes, and they said, I kind of wish this was everywhere. There are some places we have to take the cab from the airport to the hotel. Major marathons, too. He goes, this was huge for Boston to have this. And this is Fred Tressler pointing to, they had these little passes. So every athlete, coach, trainer, whomever is coming, has a photo ID, and they match the photo IDs. This is just part of it, of the organization. So like I said, it's no longer at the conference center. The building has been raised and replaced. So the Elite Athletes Village, to an extent of what was built here, is in the Fairmont Copley now, a couple of floors there. So it's a similar process that they all go into the Fairmont Copley. That's where all it's actually even better because then when they have to go to the press conferences, which we'll get to later, they just have to go down a couple of floors. Whereas when it was here, they had to go across the street. So, which isn't too bad to begin with. But still, that's not the combination is phenomenal. And it's just funny hearing elite athletes go, this is great. No matter what I have to do, I can just phone them and just go down. It's just, they love it. Another great tradition about the Boston Marathon is the media coverage. It is second only to the Super Bowl as far as the number of media that covers an event. This is Les Paulson on the left here, three-time winner. This is around 1940. I'll show you a progression. I mean, how easy it is to access, one of the great marathoners, just one guy taking pictures. Bill Rogers, who I said won 4 times. People would call him up at home, go for a run with him, interview him, go to his stores. Actually, Ken still does that. But the access was different. You could just walk up to the guy, the Greater Boston Track Club guys, who basically all the American winners of the Boston Marathon in the 70s and 80s came from the Greater Boston Track Club. Greg Meyer, Alberto Salazar, Bob Hall, wheelchair athlete, Bill Rogers, were Greater Boston Track Club guys, and they all hung out at the Elliott Lounge, which is no longer there. So the media would just hang out, have a beer at the bar, and do their story. It was just a different thing. But as media coverage changed, here's the top 3 men in 1951, and here's a couple of media in the back. It was just very low key, get your stories, and there was lots of newspapers back then. Each city had a number of newspapers, but this is how casual it was. They're hanging out here for some pictures, and then they turn around and field questions from the media in a room. Even in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when you cross the finish line, I remember Jack Fultz saying this, they would, you cross the finish line, you get your wreath, and you go to a garage of the Prudential Center or go to the barber shop, and you sit in a barber chair at the barber shop for like an hour and field questions. And he goes, Jack would after about an hour, he'd go, oh, okay, I got to go for a jog because you're in a barber chair for an hour. That's what you did back then. So, it was what it was. But then everything changed as more runners, the running boom came, more runners, more races, more attention, more international when they started coming after John Hancock's sponsorship in '86, international. So everything had to be ramped up. So as you can see, this is Hopkinton. You can see all the media vehicles lined up. And as you can see, the interviews changed a little bit from a little one-on-one on the backyard of some hotel or something. This is one of the ballrooms at the Fairmont Copley. And here's Carrie Tollefson, the U.S. Olympian, who's interviewing. They came with the top 5 women, then the top 5 men would come, and then all the media here would field questions, get some basic information. So as you can see, it has just grown. So you needed to accommodate that. So at the Fairmont Copley, and there's a couple other ballrooms that they use. So it has grown and mushroomed, which it should. For the actual race itself, that's changed too. In the very old days, you'd have some cyclists with each runner because there weren't that many. Like I said, it was under 10,000 for the longest time. So they really didn't need that much to cover the race. But then, when you're averaging 20, 30,000 runners, now you have to. So this is, again, in one of the ballrooms at the Fairmont Copley. The media is lined up in rows, and you have the wheelchair, the men's wheelchair race, the women's wheelchair race, women's open, men's open. And they can track them with the time, so it's all in front of the media. This is how they cover it. There's also media on the course. You see those big media vans, trucks that come by. But for those who are doing it real time, have the deadline basically live, this is what it looks like. And it's a little bigger, too. It's amazing. You get the results, and then the winners come here to do some quick interviews, and then there's another interview afterwards. So it's much more because it's opened up to the world now. So you have to do that, which is great. And I want to juxtapose this. This is Jordan Hassay coming in third place in 2019, and look at the wall of photographers. I mean, it's amazing how attention has just grown, and rightfully so. So you wouldn't have had this decades ago. They didn't have that. So this is right on the finish line, so you can see how that has changed too, which is great to see. And that's happened in a lot of other races too, not just Boston. Now, statues and monuments, a lot of races have their own, which is nice. Boston has a tremendous amount on the course itself, outside the course, different states. I'll focus on the ones that's basically just on the course. In 1897, the first Boston Marathon started right here on Pleasant Street in Ashland, right about where the crosswalk is. You can visit here. It's called Marathon Park right now. This is the end of the Sudbury River. There used to be a mill here that made shoe boxes to put shoes in. It burned down in the 30s or so. But there's walkways there. You can see some plaques here with some information. The first 23 years of the Boston Marathon started in Ashland at 3 different spots. So Ashland's history is in this nice little marathon park, which is great. And once in a while, they'll have races here. So you can actually be on Pleasant Street and on the starting line itself, which is really neat. After the first 2 years, 1897, 1898 here, the BAA built their clubhouse, which was down Exeter Street. The black and white photos that you saw earlier, that was on the left. It's behind the Boston Public Library. It's no longer there. So they wanted the marathon to finish there. So they had to adjust a little bit to start and finish. So the next several years, there's a bridge over here. There's an Amtrak commuter rail on the left here. And there's a bridge over here. So the next 6 or 7 years, it started on that bridge. And then it grew so much, like 80 runners, oh my God. They had to move it. So then the third and last time it was in Ashland was that muddy photo I showed you. It's a farm area near the current 4-kilometer mark. So the marathoners who run the race, when they go over the 4-kilometer mark, that's the last time it started in Ashland. So then when the marathon grew, the distance grew to 26.2 miles because the Royals wanted to see the finish, the 1908 Olympics. They wanted to see the start at Windsor Castle, and they wanted to see the finish in front of the Royal Box of the track. To do that, the distance had to increase a little bit to 26.2 miles, so thank them for the current distance. So then it moved to Hopkinton, so that's why the BAA just basically went the next distance until it ended and happened to be Hopkinton. If Ashland was bigger, it'd still be in Ashland. So you can visit these sites, which is great. The town's doing an excellent job, historical-wise, to all these different places here. And in Hopkinton Square, the starting line is right here, right about here. The starter statue is lined right up at the starting line here. This is the Hopkinton Town Green. This is George V. Brown. There's been a Brown family member for all but maybe a few years that has started the Boston Marathon. The Brown family is very integral with the BAA, the Boston Arena, the Boston Celtics, the Marathon, really helped getting these events going and staying. So a Brown family member has started a race ever since. They've only missed a couple. And this little area here, this little walkway, roadway between the Common and Main Street is called Marathon Way. And down Ash Street there is where the Hoyt statue, I'll show you later, where that is. Just to kind of give you an idea of different things. There's a Korean statue monument maybe about a block that way in front of a church that designates the great Koreans who have run the marathon, world records, did really well. So this is the starting line, actually, right about here, to show you where to go. Johnny Kelly Crossing is in here. There's two sidewalks that kind of intersect. It's called Johnny Kelly Crossing. A lot of different, really neat places to see in Hopkinton. The Yes You Can statue of the late Team Hoyt, with Rick, his son Dick Hoyt. This is in front of an old school down Ash Street. The reason the statue's down here to the side of the common, the town green, is that they would start with the wheelchair athletes, and the wheelchair athletes line up. What they used to do is line up according to their seeds on Ash Street. And then they would move from Ash Street onto the starting line in their position. And then the gun would go off, and then they would just take off. So the Hoyts were behind them. So they decided to put the statue here because that's where they would always be. It's just like a few hundred yards from the starter statue. It's a beautiful statue. I mean, the detail is just unbelievable. I remember talking to Dick when this was being created. And Dick was saying that the artist, the sculptor, was in Texas, and they would FaceTime different stages of it. And there was one when they showed Dick his head, and you can see it sort of extends because that's how it was. But he's seeing on FaceTime, he goes, "My head is huge." He goes, was that okay? And he's talking to the sculptor. He goes, "No, it's fine. You know, it's the three-dimensional depending." And I was telling Dick, I said, Dick, other than a statue, no one sees their own face three-dimensionally. You see it in a mirror in a photo. So to actually see, he goes, "Yeah, I know, it looked huge." He goes, "I didn't think it was me." I go, "I know, isn't it weird seeing yourself like that?" And then Rick loved it. I interviewed Rick several times because he could communicate through a keyboard. It took a little longer. You had to give him the questions ahead of time to give him time to do it. And he just loved it. I mean, he was just overjoyed to have this statue. It was just unbelievable. So Rick just passed away recently. Dick was a few years ago. But so inspirational. I mean, if you get a chance to see it, it's a stunning statue. It's a little bigger, but I wanted to get, for the photo, really good detail so you can really see how it is. And this woman here is Bobby Gibb, Roberta Bobby Gibb. She's the first woman to finish the Boston Marathon, 1966. She's from the area. In 1964, she was attending classes out west. And I interviewed her several times. She routinely would run ultras, like 15, 20, 30 miles. She loved nature. She loved running. And she found out the Boston Marathon, and she goes, "I want to run that." She was in California at the time. So she contacted BAA, and this is 1964, and they said women not allowed to run, which was true. The Amateur Athletic Union, the AAU, the governing body of races, not just Boston, Falmouth, any race in the country, didn't allow women to run a marathon. It wasn't the individual race, it was the AAU. And so that was true, but what was also told to Bobby was that women can't run that distance. And Bobby goes, "Really? I just ran 30 miles like 2 days ago. Guess what I'm going to do on Patriots Day?" She's thinking, good for her. She got injured. She was going to do it in 65. But 1966, she came up here. She has her brother's Bermuda shorts. She had like an old sweatshirt. She tied her hair back. 1966, she wasn't sure she was going to get arrested, she said. The guy's going to push me off. She goes, "I didn't know." So she sort of hid on the corner. At the time, from 65 to 85, like I was telling you, the finish line was on Ring Road. Those 2 decades, from 65 to 85, the starting line was on Hayden Road. So you actually had to start on a side street and then turn onto Main Street. So on that turn is where she sort of kind of hid. And then she jumped in because she was a good runner, so she knew her pace. So she jumped in, and they knew she was a woman. It wasn't too tough to figure out. And she said the whole race, all the men loved it. She goes, "I wish my girlfriend, my wife ran." She said the support was just great. The mayor, word filtered down. The mayor shook her hand. A finish line. It was great. It was exactly what she wanted to do. Show people it could be done. Obviously, 1966. It was 6 years before. In 1972 was Title IX, equal federal funding for men and women's sports. The AAU finally relented after lots of pressure to allow women to run. So this was part of that, which was great. So for the anniversary, they wanted to have a statue of her to commemorate, put it in the same spot where she was. So she's an artist. I mean, she's a neuroscience. She's law degree. You can talk to her about anything. It's unbelievable. So she was going to just create a statue of a woman runner. And they said, no, we want you to make it you. She's like, make myself the statue? She goes, yeah, we want it to be you. She goes, I've never done that. She goes, okay. Well, I've never had a model for running because no one's going to run in place. She goes, so how do I do that? So I was talking to her. She goes, well, I'm looking at my arm, and that's how I made my arm. And it's just like looking at herself going, okay, I remember what my Bermuda shorts look like. And she created the statue. It's a beautiful statue. This is the Cultural Center in Hopkinton. They dedicated it a year or two ago. They were doing some construction on Hopkinton grounds, so they haven't put it there yet. I think it's going to be there for this year. But when this was made, it was still being dug up, so they didn't want to risk it. So for the past year or two, it's been in front of the Cultural Arts Center. And this is her at the unveiling and everything. So you will see that, which is a great addition to the history, and also having the statues, which is unbelievable. And bringing it back to Tewksbury, the late Nico Kaufman, sculptor, who has some artifacts actually here in the library. One of them is an early example of this. It's in the display case in front. If you get a chance to come here and look at it, it's beautiful, stunning. This is the Spirit of the Marathon statue that he created in Hopkinton at the 1 mile mark. And there's an identical one in Greece at the original marathon that started in Marathon, Greece, ended in Athens, Greece. Stylianos Kyriakidis here on the left, who you saw in the earlier black and white photo. His son Dimitri wanted to get a statue like this to commemorate the Olympics going back to Athens in 2004, and then have an identical one here, 2006. To make a hugely long story short, because a lot of stuff happened to get it into Greece, Nico Kaufman created this beautiful statue, and this is probably even double the length of the base. The base shows the rocky area of Marathon. The god Pan, P-A-N, who helped Philippides, is there. On the other side is Kyriakidis wearing the wreath. It's detailed, unbelievable. It's permanently here at a nursery in Hopkinton, where they have shrubs and everything, that kind of nursery. So it was just going to be Stylianos Kyriakidis who won in 1946. So the mayor of Marathon agreed, we'll have it on that starting area. Then the mayor changed. The new mayor said no. So Dimitri goes, well, I'll go to Athens, maybe be at the finish line. So that mayor goes, yeah, okay, I'll do it. But we want to have another statue of Spiridon Louis, the Greek who won the first marathon, 1896 Modern Olympic Games. So Nico's like, he didn't say this, but it's like, it's not a painting where I can just add another guy. I've been working on this for a long time. How am I going to do this? Meanwhile, it's getting closer to the Olympics in 2004. Now he has to do something else. So what he did was he created Spiridon Louis, who won in 1896, and he basically just stuck him to Kyriakidis. But what he did creatively is, if you notice, the feet of Stylianos Kyriakidis is running on the ground, but Spiridon's isn't. So the theme is that Kyriakidis is running along the spirit of Spiridon Louis, hence Spirit of the Marathon statue, the name of it. So it was getting really close to getting it in 2004, and they finally got it there. Then it was stuck in customs, and they had to do some negotiating, and within, I think, about less than a week or two before the Olympics, and everything else is being sent, athletes, pole vaults, everything. The statue is finally there, and it's still there. It's beautiful. You can see it if you look it up. And then this one here. So it's amazing. And then you can see, like I said, an earlier version of this, probably about this big, in a display case at the front lobby of the library, Tewksbury Man. So it's a beautiful statue if you ever get to see it. It's stunning when you get to see it. Back with Johnny the Elder Kelly, both these gentlemen. This is about the 19.1 mile mark in Newton, just after Newton City Hall, for those of you who have run the marathon. It's on your left as you're running. They kept wanting to honor Johnny Kelly in different areas. They were going to wait till he stopped running, but he never stopped running until the day he died, 97 years old. So, like, Runner's World wanted to name him Runner of the Century, but they were going to wait. They can't wait. He's not going to stop running. Same with the statue. So, for 1991, it was going to be his last full marathon. Then he became Grand Marshal, and he ran a short portion of it. And they kind of always kept him part of it, but he kept running a full distance. So I was like, guy's not going to stop. We got to honor him. Let's do it. Why wait? So they created a statue, which is great. So it's Johnny Kelly on the left, winning in the 30s, holding hands with himself, running in the 90s. And Young at Heart, which he always sang, Frank Sinatra song. Didn't take too much to have him sing it. Just ask him. So this is a beautiful statue too. It was originally dedicated about a block from this, if you know the area at all, another block up, and it was facing the runners. And it did it in 1991, marathon weekend, the day before the 91 marathon. And Bill Rogers was there, the creator was there, the BAA was there. Ibrahim Hussein, who was defending champion, showed up, which if you're going to run the Boston Marathon or any marathon, you don't do anything the day before. That's how much he was regarded. I mean, you have the defending champion. Ibrahim Hussein showed up. And it's dedicated there, and I think within a few months, a car hit it and broke its arm. Boston drivers, right? So they fixed it, and they're like, well, let's not put it back, it's just going to happen again. So about 2 blocks before, still on the left-hand side, about 80 feet in from the course on Com Ave, they put it here, and he's facing the direction of the runners now. It's kind of tough to see when you're running because you really got to kind of look to your left as a runner, but it's a great meeting place that everyone goes to get their training. Everyone shows up here. This is an early photo that I took because these bushes are like now up here, and this little bush in the back is really full. But it's a great place to see it. The quick history, obviously, is Heartbreak Hill. Heartbreak Hill is about 20-mile mark. Johnny won Boston 1935, so he was favored to win 1936. And around this area, right, Newton area, before you get to Boston College, he was trailing Ellison Tarzan Brown from Rhode Island, another great American marathoner. So he caught up to him about 20 miles or so, 20-mile mark area, and sort of tapped Tarzan in the back, kind of like, this is my race, I got it. Which sort of woke up Ellison. He's like, what? And then he just took off. Ellison did. And Johnny ended up coming in 5th place. And Jerry Nason, the sports editor of the Globe, who covered the race for decades, said that move broke Johnny's heart. And it morphed into Heartbreak Hill, which is about the 20-mile mark right before Boston College. Johnny came in 2nd place 7 times. I talked to him over the years. He goes, half of those I should have won. That was one of them. You don't do that. When you catch up to a guy, you keep going. He goes, I was a kid, I was cocky, I just won. So you don't do that when you catch up to someone. But you learn, right? I mean, it's like getting that perfect wave in surfing, right? You always learn. To commemorate the bombings from 2013, this is Boylston Street. The finish line is right about here. Here's the Lenox again, I was saying, just give you an area. Pablo Eduardo was chosen to create, it's like a 2-part monument. And he really put a lot of thought into him and other people and organizers, family members, really spent a lot of time. He has different rocks and different materials from throughout New England to kind of represent everybody. He wanted to have the spires here lit to kind of be a beacon, he said. This one here is in front of the Forum. The second bomb, which the Forum's not here anymore. The first bomb was down about a block. So a similar monument is right about down there. They extended this out a little bit, took a few parking spaces away, because he said, the bombings changed everyone's lives. So we kind of did this like a permanent change. Really did some thought into it. So it's here, and there's also another one, like I said, down there. I caught this right at dusk to get some of the light that you can see. So it is moving when you get there. It's the kind of thing when you walk up to your son, to stay a little quiet, just naturally. So it took a while to get. They were a little late beyond deadlines because they really wanted to pay attention to detail and listen to the families and everything. So it marks both places very, very nicely. And I'll close with this one. This is the Boston Marathon Centennial Monument at Colby Square, about a block after the finish line. To commemorate the centennial, the original design included an arch that they didn't include. A lot of different public organizers and committees are involved, so a lot of things change. So instead of having the arch with information. They made these 4 different posts. Each post has the logo of the BAA, the city, that each city and town that the race goes through. There's a lot of different things, the granite from different areas. The course is right here. The wreath is represented right around the circle. You can't see with this detail, but every male, female open, male, female wheelchair, and male, female masters winners are listed here in a circle that just grows and grows and grows and grows, and every year or two they engrave. So you go there, you look down, it has the name, country, and time. It just kind of like grows. There's a point they're going to have to extend this thing. So it's a beautiful, it's a huge medallion monument right at Copley Square. Basically, the Fairmont Copley is right over here on the other side. So it kind of gives you an idea. The Fairmont's on one side of Copley Square. This is on the other. And this is Boylston Street here. So again, to give you an idea, about a block from the finish line on the right is where this is. So you can see that. It's really, really neat. When you get close, you can see all the different granite colors each town and community goes through. It's really neat. The elevation is right here. Very, very detailed. It's amazing how this was put together. And they clean it very often, so it always has a nice shine. I took this one weekend during the marathon. Everyone comes here. It's really neat to see. But those are just the ones that are on the course. Like I say, there's one in Melrose for Clarence DeMar. There's one in Ireland for Johnny Hayes. It's everywhere. So, but I just wanted to focus on the course itself, which was neat. So those are just some. There's a lot of traditions and lore of the Boston Marathon that's just very unique to Boston that I wanted to focus on with the new book. And so some of the photos went from the past 2 books, but it's basically all these, just to give you an idea of the race itself and just, what brings people every year to run it. It's unbelievable, since 1897. So if anyone has any questions on anything I brought up or didn't bring up, the race or not? Anything? All right, so, yeah. With the other major marathons expansion? Yeah, that's what sort of kind of kicked the BAA in the butt to like, let's get going, Because for decades, the BAA was basically, people want to run the marathon because it's Boston, period, which is true, still. In 1970, they started the first qualifying standards because there's like over 1,000 runners and it was ruining the integrity and the whole thing. So other marathons started popping up with a running boom in the 70s, Chicago, New York. And they sort of benefited from, there weren't too many marathons. In the old days, there was like Culver City, Yonkers. They were like Olympic qualifiers for us, Boston. So those growing pains, these marathons already went through. So the Chicago and New York that started in the 70s sort of saw what worked or didn't work. Maybe they didn't pay attention, but they kind of hit the ground running, no pun intended, to say, all right, we're going to create, first marathon, 1970, whatever. All right, let's have a medal. Let's have a wreath. Let's have prize money. At the beginning, So Boston, who's been around for decades before that, didn't have those. People started to come saying, yeah, we want to get some prize money. International runners who came to Boston anyway, international runners always came to Boston, but not as many. So then a lot of people started looking at those other races, go, I want to get a medal. It's like, yeah, I want to go there. So and Boston's like, well, people come to us because it's Boston. But then it got to a point in the mid-'80s, they're like, yes and no, yes they do, but come on, you got to let's do some other things. So that was what the growth, the kind of, they started. Tim Kilduff was a race director for those couple of years. Will Cloney, prior to Will Cloney, the Boston Marathon was just run by committee. Will Cloney was the first race director in 1946. And after him was Tim Kilduff for a couple of years, then Guy Morse for several years, and now Dave McGilvery. So Tim Kilduff was right in the middle, early 80s, when, as part of getting sponsorship money, that was a big deal, like you were saying, Chicago, New York was getting sponsorship money. So a lot of runners go, well, I'd love to run Boston, but, I'm going to go there for money. Boston doesn't have money. You win, you get, a bowl of beef stew, and you get a wreath and a medal. And Andrew Burford joked, he won in 1968 as a vegetarian. He goes, well, I got the medal and the wreath. You go, I can't find the wreath either, but I got the medal still. So we're the BA was a little behind. They caught up very quickly, and they're so good now with knowing all the things to do. But there were growing pains like that. So in the early 80s, the BA said, well, let's get a sponsorship. And they went out and they sort of had a sports attorney who's sort of, it's a long story, but he basically said, I'll take over the marathon. You still organize it. I'll take over the marathon, and if I raise anything over $400,000, I can keep it. The $400,000 you can keep to do sponsorship money. So I'm simplifying it to the point that the court stepped in because the BEA said, "Wait a second, we're going to lose this marathon," and the court stepped in and said, "No, you're a nonprofit. You can't do this deal. So we're voiding the deal. It's your race now. Kind of don't make a mistake again." This is the 83, 84. The same time about the medals in 1983. Approaching John Hancock in 1985 to start their sponsorship in 1986. So those few years, like you were wondering about, that's when the quantum leap that the BA, in addition to having the heritage of this race from 1897, sort of, jumped into, the new era of offering prize money for the first time, sponsorship money, the parents' money. You had the international runners coming to Boston. Oh, now I can earn some money, okay, in addition to running this great race. So that's what really, and that's on the heels of the running boom in the 70s. So that little confluence of all these different things sort of happened at the same time, and then you would have, like I said, under 10,000 runners, 8 to 9 on average, until the Centennial was building up, and then, the VA goes, I think more than 10,000 are probably going to want to run this in 1996. And it's only like about 10 years later from doing all these big, it was just a real short period of time that the BAA did these big changes, whereas a whole new marathon did all these big changes as a new marathon. So it wasn't a change. It was just, let's do this. So there's a weird kind of a thing like that. It worked, but it was a tough time transitionally like that, different culture, different mindset and everything. But it's worked to where it is now. It's just this huge, you have to accommodate the world in addition to charity runners, in addition to runners who aren't going to win anything. So they do a very good, they balance that, I think, very well, to accommodate. To me, the Boston Marathon is all of that. It's not just the winners, it's not just the age group winners, it's not just the charity runners, it's not just the amateur runners. To me, it's all of it makes it. It's like the Olympics aren't just one event. It's all the events that make the Olympics. That's right. That's how I look at the Boston Marathon. It's all these things, the Paralympics, para-athletes who compete. And we had the first wheelchair athlete with Bob Hall in 1975. There was no wheelchair categories in marathons and races at all until he became one in 1975, where he approached him and Bill Squires, his coach at Greater Boston Track Club. Said, I'm a wheelchair athlete. He's done really well in the mile, national champion, I can do the marathon. Oh, we don't have that. He goes, well, all right, if he finishes under 3 hours, he'd be an official finisher. And he did. 2 hours and 58 minutes in 1975 was the first official wheelchair finisher in anything. Everything you see now is from Bob Hall finishing. So it's just, and that's like within that little 10-year period, all these huge things. And once the dust settled, I was like, okay, what happened? But they were able to build on that, which is great. One thing didn't overdo them. They're really able to build. It's a small organization to be, 30, 40 employees. For what they do, it's unbelievable. I marvel at it. Any other questions? Yep. I know, the unicorn? Yeah. There's a bunch of stories. There's nothing definite of why the BAA, when they formed in 1877, picked that as a logo. I'll give you a couple stories, and you can pick whatever you want. One was and Dan Ashworth told me this when they were creating the medal. It was told to his father and so on, that there was a cigar shop that the BAA members would go to, and here's a picture of it, and it's refurbished in the BAA office, of a cigar lighter of a unicorn. And you'd flip it, and the lighter would come out, and it was light the cigars. There's another one that's just the mythical character of the unicorn that you can never get. They like that. There's another one, I think, of members daughter or something liked the unicorn. It's just, there's nothing really, a lot of the old records, because the BA clubhouse burned, they lost the clubhouse, but a lot of the records at some time later got lost, destroyed, burned, stuff. So if it was written down somewhere, those old records, like Lawyer Ratty, late Lawyer Ratty, was trying to get so many artifacts back. She just did a yeoman's job getting, like that display case of medals, thanks to her. She was trying to find lots of old stuff to answer those questions. So it's almost kind of fun that there is no, it's like lost in time kind of thing. So the cigar shop thing, I kind of like that one. But yeah, I kind of like the one just because it's a mythical. I like it because it's a mythical. He's always looking left, stuff. So it's a neat little thing. But yeah, John Hans did the book on the BAA, and nothing very definitive about it. So maybe if you can form them together. If somebody saw the cigar thing in addition to that, I know it's a funny thing. Any other questions on anything else? Well, I'll be here afterwards too and hang out if you think of anything like that. So I appreciate all of you here and those of you joining at home with the Boston Marathon, and I hope you pick some neat little stories up you can share and learn something or just have some fun. Thanks again.